Karibu sana. It's now 6 minutes past 7 a.m. on this beautiful day of Tuesday. I really want to take a look at really what is happening in the country and of course across our borders, and just to make sense of what is happening politically so and even socially speaking, because that is what you do best. My name is Victor Low. You can talk to us on social media at Victor Low at KBC Channel 1, and we'll be talking to you on our social media platform as well. All right, so let me take you through the front page of a local daily here. Let me start with the Standard. Standard has headline, Justice on Trial. That is what's on the front page. Justice on Trial. That is what is here. In relations to yesterday's president's speech at the Supreme Court of Kenya at 12 years of Supreme Court has been a mixed bag for different people. While some hail the Apex Court as the epitome of jurisprudence, others feel it has not met expectation. President William Ruto too has his word for the judges, whose word is a final on matters litigation. And he said that we always talk about judicial independence, and it is a fundamental principle of our constitution. But what happens when we have judicial overreach and interference? That's what he terms judicial overreach and interference. And he went ahead and pleaded with the courts to be independent in as far as matters political is concerned, and he asked the courts to stick to their lane. That is also on the front page of the Daily Nation, but Daily Nation is somehow different. Historic polls, that is what I have here. I have these two leaders, that is Trump and Kamala Harris, going to the polls, and the US deciding on who is going to lead them for the next 4 years. Historic polls. And now everything is at stake because it's a test of democracy where presidential election, unlike any other in the United States history, entered its last full day yesterday with Donald Trump and Kamala Harris and their campaigns scrambling to get supporters to the polls in a contest each portrays as an existential. What did I say?
That one.
That one.
Existential.
Existential moment for America. If Trump 78 wins, he would be the oldest person in US history to be elected president, while Harris 60 has a chance to become the first woman to hold the world's most powerful job. So either way, history will be written today or not. Let me start with my guest, Daniel Orogo, on set. Daniel Orogo is the current Africa Regional Coordinator, Democracy Moves, Managing Director, Civic Voices Initiative Kenya, and Political and Governance Consultant. Daniel, good morning.
Good morning.
Good to see you, my brother.
It's a pleasure to be here.
Karibu sana.
Asante.
All right, and George Kithi is an advocate of the High Court. Wakili, good morning.
Good morning. How are you?
Karibu sana.
Asante.
I'm doing fantastic. So let me just start. I think it's also is good because this is a big brother. US is a big brother to us. I think let's run away from our home issues a bit and to make sense of what is happening. I know you gentlemen, you've been following the US story, and let me start with you, Dan. Nobody knew that Kamala would make it to this point until her name cropped up. Mm-hmm. But now we are here.
Yeah.
Yes.
Well, I think it's more of democracy on balance. Just like you've alluded to, all the two candidates, either of them succeeds, they make history.
Yes.
In one way or the other. Like you said, for Donald Trump, is the age, but also is making a comeback. And, you know, it happens on other democracies, probably on the global south. But it's quite interesting that that can happen in the United States as well, where he was the president between 2016 and 2020, and then after that, Joe Biden's, and then he makes a comeback. That would really be interesting if at all Democrats, you know, would ascend to power. But for Kamala Harris, just like you've mentioned, could be the first time we are seeing a woman on the topmost seat in the globe with a global power. Quite interesting, again, that there's been a confusion whether she is, the politics of US, whether she's a black or she's Indian black, or, the father and the mother being from Jamaican Indian as well. So I think that there are historical perspectives on these elections, and you've seen the heightened campaign that has been diverted towards very thorny and emotional issues in the American citizenry, talking about immigration. Statements have been made about immigration. When Donald Trump is saying that he is going to deport all illegal immigrants, in the country, he's been riding on that. So saying that, the domestic jobs are being taken by migrants in this country. On the other side, Democrats are hell-bent on saying that, they need to, create jobs. The divide between Republicans and Democrats, historically, has been quite interesting. But again, just like you've mentioned, what then is our issue in this election as Kenyan? I think that is quite important to say. That the American foreign policy to Africa, and especially to Kenya, has been quite interesting, that there has been a close bilateral relationship between the US and Kenya. And recently you saw that President William Ruto was accorded a state reception and a state visit. The first probably African heads of state to be given that within a period of time. Kenya has been given a NATO member. So that means that should we have Democrats ascending into positions of power, then it means that our relationship with America, especially in training, in equipping, with weapons and with training, capacity and security issues would still be enhanced. But again, what happens if Republicans get into position? You understand Donald Trump's issue with Africa. Ever since he was in power between 2016 to 2022, he never stepped foot in Africa. The wife was here actually, but he himself didn't spend some time. So we are seeing Joe Biden's, even in his last March, he's visiting Angola, just his first tour in Africa. So we could actually see the relationship Democrats are having with their policy in Africa, the difference Republicans are having in their foreign policy towards Africa. So I think there is so much to be done, but it is close. The election is very close, and as we speak, any one of them can emerge. Any one of them can imagine.
It is, Wakili, still history, either way you look at it. Their kind of democracy is quite different, even from the way they handle their policies, the campaign messaging, and how they coin it to appeal to the international community and even to Americans themselves. But America is a collective, it's a country where every word you say counts. And it can be picked in one such way, and your opponent will ride with it. But one important thing here is, when you looked at Obama, Obama was a mixed race. I don't know whether this was deliberate by picking Harris, or because she was the vice president, and now she's also mixed race, Jamaica and Indian. What do you think America is trying to do, starting with Obama to now we have Harris?
If Kamala is elected. Let me put it this way. This is a very interesting time in terms of the US, because you see, Obama and Republicans have had a Puritan approach to the societal content, and they are more aggressive on the Puritan American benefits in terms of citizenry and the packaging of America as a Puritan white community. Ku Klux Klan, all the historical issues, even towards the acceptance of especially women to vote, and the black man and other people of race. So they've had their own turmoil. America became a superpower after the Second World War, on account of advanced technology in military. And of course, in this world, it's the economy and the military power that superimposes a country on others. What we have here is a mixed bucket of what would, in terms of internal issues, especially on economy and job creation, which is very emotional for them. Then, of course, the immigration issue, as my good friend has pointed out, but more importantly, what does immigration has to do in terms of the friction with the white man in US? Because that's really the clarion call for, you know, he says it's adulterating the society basically with a lot of patterns of colors here and there. And again, the international relationship with other countries, of course, there's Iran. On the side, there's a war that is being prosecuted in the Middle East. That's a region that right now, the ecosystem is not at equilibrium. The issues of environment, lots of typhoons, many issues are coming and killing people, actually more than even the pandemic probably. Taiwan has been hit, I think, the third time, this time, by an unsettled climatic issue, I think last week. Then there is also the issue of Ukraine-Russia war vis-a-vis the international community involvement. Right now we have the axis of, the Korean North, the North Korea moving into assisting the prosecution of war by Russia, and that invites now South Korea and the whole dynamics of the world. Yeah. So you need a very strong leader if you look at it that way. What US needs is either a person who then would probably bring the war decibels much lower for purposes of settling the world again. Remember, during Trump's time, there was no war. Either he was lucky or it's the way he behaved or people feared to start a war because he would get involved. It's actually the Democrats that have always had... Obama tried to stop the war, but in a very chaotic manner when they were pulling out from the Taliban and stuff like that. So you see, America is everything in the world. I would say that. Right from dollarization of economies to the political dollarization, the axis of China now moving closer in ties with Russia, trying to prosecute the BRICS movement, which basically has not even taken off. The African context is we basically, the flag as we go to China, we go. We're called in Russia, we'll go.
That actually forms my next question, the implication of either way winning.
Yes.
The implication to Africa.
And of course, lastly, is that US has tried to put a woman into power. It has failed right from Clinton. She came very close. In fact, the exit polls she was the president for the people. But eventually, American democracy is very, very complicated, like you put it, this way that, you see here we have what we call direct democracy and indirect democracy in our constitution. Direct democracy is that we put our leaders into power by electing them. We exercise that direct democracy. And then when they get into power, now we have representative democracy because the members of parliament now represent us in parliament. Yes. And therefore they prosecute our laws, they make our laws, they tell us what to do, they do our budget, we give them money through taxes and stuff like that. They even tell us how much we're going to borrow and approve and all that. The US, they've moved from direct democracy to the ideal democracy, which is basically a representation of the people by a few, so they can prosecute your issues. And they do it even in election. So for us, you see, we elect them, they represent us. For them, they elect the ones that elect. You get the point? So that's why they're called colleges. So when you have many billions of people or millions of people, they don't vote direct. They vote for those that will vote. Yeah. Okay? The only thing I can explain to you here is like probably IBC, what we're having now in Kenya. What Parliament will do is put into people who put into people the IBC commissioners. All right? Yes. So Parliament elects a setup of a council of sorts, or committee of sorts, that then interviews the IBC people, but some set rules have been put into place. That the US is probably the ideal of what democracy, because democracy is about representation of the people through and through. So you'll hear people have voted, but they have voted for people who then say who the president is in terms of colleges. Now, usually it's very predictable. For instance, if it were here, then in Nyanza, you would know they'll vote for Raila. In Mulima, you know they vote for Gachagua, or so on and so forth, right? So it's very predictable. Now, when we say it close to call, it means that the margins and the issues are very complicated. For instance, you now see a movement of black people in terms of policies to Trump, in terms of half, because the issues that are being prosecuted by Obama have been. The Arab Americans obviously were democratic leaning. Now, because of the war in the Middle East, they have moved, most of them have moved because they have been calls of stopping the war and not arming Israel. And Israel, of course, have always been getting weapons from the US. Now, that has moved them towards Trump. So there's been a movement of all these patterns in terms of who elects who, or this representative go which movement. And therefore, yes, you can't say as we speak, even today, who is going to win. Lastly, and I'll give this example, for instance, a few years ago as Law Society, we used to vote for our president using, you post your ballot, all right? So you receive a ballot, then you say, okay, Victor is the president of Law Society, and then you send it. Of course, then the integrity was once you receive, they'll be opened and be transparency. And there's a movement between the ballot heights being sent that you received, you say you've received, and then sent to you. That's what they do. So there's early voting, all right, in US. So people have already cast their votes and they're waiting in some states. Others are doing it now. So then even in that early voting, the pattern can be seen also, because you already know who the voters are. There's a voter register, and then there's a delegates register for the voting.
And just to remind our viewers that one state in America is as big as Kenya.
Even more.
No, the Kenya is not can make a state. Kenya is a small thing.
It's a small.
It's a small place in the US.
It
in fact, in one state.
It is the United.
You make it look so
United States. So there's some states probably are all the size of Kenya, and others are larger than Kenya, and that is what tells the supremacy of the US, and also what makes it so sovereign and powerful in the League of Nations and international community. And I think I agree with what Wakili was talking about. Is then this particular elections also is a time that the US democracy also has to redeem itself from what happened in January 6th of 2020, when there was insurrection in Pentagon and all these things. So I think Americans have had difficult time, especially when they would want to appear to lecture the rest of the world about democracy. Because then people would always make a reference to that particular occurrences. You understand? Especially those who are extremely in variance with the United States. And so I think one of the statements probably that they would want to make is that democracy really needs to be restored. And probably that was the election of Joe Biden's. Now you asked about, was it expected for Kamala Harris to, exactly? Because it was a very short time for transition.
Yes.
The first particular debate that Donald Trump had with Joe Biden, you could see the lapses. It was very clear, especially from democratic institutions and those who call shots in the Democratic Party. The Nancy Pelosi's, you understand? Jack Schumer and everyone, the powerful senators that calls a shot in Democratic Party. They had actually seen that if the ticket of Joe Biden would suffice, then it was going to be a total and a complete win for Donald Trump. Completely. From the first debate. I think it was within the public view from that debate. Everyone could see that President Joe Biden was fumbling on the debate. Sometimes memory lapses, sometimes, pausing, a long pause. So it actually looked at his mental stability and physical health. But again, there was no, I don't see what could have happened if the National Democratic Convention could actually call the candidates, that they would vet candidates and bring them to call on the National Democratic Convention. It could have taken time. It could have taken a lot of controversies within the political party, within the Democratic establishment itself. What would be the implications of that? Giving Donald Trump a free hand. By that time, there were squabbles to settle on a candidate. So I think they would just make sure that they have a candidate, and then they will deal with the baggage of that candidate. But I think they had one in Kamala Harris as well.
You know, America, whenever they have their campaign messaging, it goes beyond America. And it seems that everyone in America understands the democracy pretty fine, that it's quite different from what we have here. Here, you talk of, this region can vote for that region. You can easily predict the way you said, Wakili. But then now, America will pick one contentious issue. Let's take, for example, the Ukraine and Russia war. We've seen the ripple effect for years, and here we are today. I don't know what's your mind in terms of whoever wins. How is this going to change the Russia-Ukraine war and generally now start to change the effect that we've had over time because of these two countries?
Let me put it this way. I think that introduces the folly of democracy. You know, democracy is not ideal at all. Democracy prescribes one thing. You are a society. You live after a certain cycle of number of years. You go into elections. And you divide yourself into biases, which are not prescribed. Muslim, Christian, ethnic, color, everything. You vote according to what you want.
Yes.
And it may be most unreasonable thing, but you still vote. I vote for him because he has a bravado, he's a star, he's a rock star, and all that. You can do all that, right? So the problem with democracy is that it is divisive. So you divide yourself, hoping that the elasticity of the nation, as it divides itself, you can still come back. And therefore, for every cycle, divide the society and then bring it back into the fold. You know, in the Bible, probably should have stuck to that. Should have allowed God to pick the leaders. So there's Samuel here, there's I don't know who, from God. But now it's the human beings whose brains are not God's brains. So what they prosecute is personal interest. Now, the interest for us, of course, the first feature of division in our country, for instance, is ethnicity. And therefore we divide ourselves along ethnicity. The economy may be from the intellectual of the urbanites in Nairobi and Mombasa and Kisumu, and those ones look at probably the economy and they talk more about the economy. But in terms of prosecution of the actual election, we go ethnic because that's the first feature of division in the country. In very dominant campaigning, you'll see Kamala saying, "I'm one of you," when he's appealing to the Hispanics and, you know, all that, the color people. And the blacks are prosecuted differently. And the black movement and the riots, quoting from the histories of the movement up to now. And even in conventions, you bring an Arab to talk, you bring an African to talk, and all that. So you see, then the international element. That's why Obama flew at a point to Israel and back when he was accused of being weak on international relations. And what I think is, in matters of international relations, is because then how does US remain to be dominant in the world under the leadership? Because it could weaken, and therefore Russia emerges. You see, there's this Cold War element that continues to be, you know, it became hot a bit, now it gets cold, and on and forth, so on and so forth, because of the president, the personality of the president. When, like you said, the president of US talks, it's not mere rhetoric. It is a communication to the world. It's a communication to the country. It actually invites world policy completely. For instance, UN can pass whatever resolution they want on Israel, whatever they want. It won't be prosecuted.
And it will be effected.
Yes, it will not be effected if US does not want. In fact, US can veto an entire 99.9% US resolution. So you realize that even at that apex of the world where the UN prosecutes certain issues in matters economy, matters war, in matters stability of the world, UN still calls the shots, ultimately as a single voice for what happens in the world. And therefore it is not just a vote by the US, by the people of the US. It's actually a vote for the world, because you see the interests are, so the Talibans would probably want so and so, the Palestinians would want probably this one, the Israelis. In fact, it is said Netanyahu is waiting for these elections to know how to go and prosecute himself.
So it means that it's not even Kenya. The way you can say that when Kenya, our democracy, the way it is right now, if candidate X or Y is voted into office, a certain jurisdiction, either our neighboring countries, somebody is going to benefit because of something here and here and there. But with America, the whole world benefits. But I want to ask a question when we come back after this break. We've had, America has never prioritized Africa so much, apart from the Clinton and the Bush regime. Not even Obama, not so much.
They have.
No, the Clinton and Bush regime.
They do. They take our resources.
They take our resources
so much.
They have prioritized Africa. And the scramble of African resources that is going on,
Let's take a break. Let's take a break. Welcome back. So they say that when America catches cold, sneezes, all of us catches cold. So I think it's so important to talk about matters America and what it really means, because America is a big brother. We can't avoid that. America is a big brother, and that is why when during the swearing in last week, gentlemen, you'll agree with me that the ambassador, Meg, was there, frontline. So it's quite important for us. But before I ask a question, and you almost swallowed me, the Bush and the Clintons administration and regime. But the priority that America has over Africa, is it because, what is it? Okay, I want to say something, but what is it about? Dan.
Well, I think we were just faulting you because then you said the kind of relationship that the regimes have had with Africa. You are a little bit biased to the positive end, and that's why we are saying no. It's not only to the positive end. I mean, we can account for some things that have happened within the continent that the United States has been responsible for. You know, in the space of international diplomacy, what you can see the foreign policy historically, that look at America had no really interest around colonization, all right? It was purely European powers who, some men sat somewhere on the Berlin Conference and divided Africa, all right? I don't know with whose permission, and say this one go to this country. But you could see that Americans were not there. But then after that, there had been a lot of interest on the scramble of Africa. One, because Africa is becoming endowed with resources, and therefore much of their companies and resources are dependent on the extraction industries that are in Africa, or resources. So I think that is one thing that we are always trying to avoid, to talk about. But I think it's important to say that the northern hemisphere really depends on the African continent, much of it because of the resources that are endowed. And what has become of late, when you're talking about the relationship, we've seen situations where this scramble for resources, especially in the African soil, has been militarized. And I like what Wakili was talking about, looking at the veto power. The US has a veto power at the United Nations Security Council. I was reading an article where we've seen a lot of almost 37 vetoes that the US has passed. Some of it has affected Africa. I'll give you an example. In 2011, when we had an issue in Libya here, in McHugh, that was the regime of Democrats, Hillary Clinton being the Secretary of State. We had a problem here in Libya when the UN Security Council, through the veto powers of United Nations and America, veto so that we have a no-fly zone in Libya. And that led to the disposition of Muhammad Gaddafi, right?
Yes.
That is just one example. So if we have military moving in, especially in the guise of protecting the civilians, and actually going into war, nobody is questioning that. In fact, we could have a lot of time next time to question why is it that sometimes we see this into the lenses of soft gloves and coercive power and international diplomacy, but then we are not questioning why is it that this relationship with them, America is big and no country, for example, we cannot say that Kenya can have a bilateral agreement with the US. You've just said that one state in the United Nations is bigger than Kenya. So how would Kenya have a relationship? Tell me, what kind of bilateral talks would you have with such a power?
But we can even, we can even twist it this way.
Yes.
How Kenya is important to the US?
That's what I'm saying. The importance is that you've talked about trade here, that is we are doing our trade. Then trade basically matters of ago. I think Wakili was talking about, even if we are having trade, but those are just kind of trade concessions. So we have a bilateral agreement with the trade. I mean, we have a military training center here. Just, was it at Manda Bay? That we are actually offering our coastlines for strategic military position to the US and to Europe. We're having Batuk. That's where here in Nanyuki. A very key strategic position for the UK for training for their military in the whole world. So what I'm just trying to say is that yes, there could be a bilateral security situation, but what is the benefit? Do we reap exact benefit from these bilateral talks? So I think this is a conversation that we should have.
In terms of balance of trade.
Yes.
When Kamala Harris, Wakili, when Kamala Harris, her name was flouted, people were a bit sketchy about it, but she's risen through the polls up to where right now she is. And when you compare Trump and Kamala Harris, Trump has been there in the U.S. Politics for years. But some people would say that the way she coined her message did not so much resonate with the voter. Perhaps you can give it because of the time that she had to turn around and all that. But we have to give it to her. The Democrats and the think tanks have made some tremendous job to bring her up to where now she's able to compete with Trump neck to neck.
Well, I think the advantage she enjoys is the advantage of, a new look. Because it was more of compared to Biden than compared to Trump. Right? Her choice was more a compared
to Biden.
choice to Biden, who was weak.
And to carry the Democrats' flag.
Yes. So the Democrats' chances were fumbled. When she came, and therefore there was re-energized environment and the stature of the presidency candidature changed for Democrats. If it was a different person like Michelle, I'm sure it should be higher. Maybe Trump would have been at 20% by now, because of the way she's confronting issues head-on and the way she expresses, cajoles, seduces the voter. An election is a seduction process where you speak to the voter for purposes of gaining the mental, agreeing more of a social, economic agreement on how you're going to impose your leadership on the people. So that seductive process is, you must be good at seducing. I mean, have you ever seen President William Ruto talking at US at a point? He was very seductive. And I could see Biden glowing, obviously, because of the words that are used and the packaging. Obviously, most of them, if looked at, have a debate around there. But that is what election is. It's a seductive process. Now, if you come to the US vis-a-vis Africa and the world and Kamala Harris and Trump in terms of candidature, in the context of US, its policy to the world is conquer and dominate. You conquer and dominate. So how do you conquer and dominate? First, of course, it's militarily. The fear that US is a superpower. That's why then you don't try to attack US and its interest. And it's a perception created. Because obviously they went to Somalia and they didn't conquer it, all right, at a point. But there is a created, messaging that it is a superpower. And obviously because of just 2 bombs dropped in somewhere in Hiroshima and Nagasaki and the nuclear and there's many weapons and all that, and it's military all of. Second is, how do you then continue to militarily dominate? Is you continue to create presence in other areas like Africa. You create a base here, you go to Guinea, you create a base, you go to Mali. And Russia, of course, has tried that, but it's never superimposed really quickly on the African context. The third one is the economic issue, where then that becomes a negotiated area, but you conquer and dominate on account of, first, you dollarize the whole economy of the world, where if you look at a shilling, you look against the dollar. If you look at a yen, it's against the dollar. If you look at anything you do at an international mercantile environment or trade environment, you look it against the dollar. And that popularizes in the mind and psyche of the world the dependency on the economic equilibrium. Today, if there's inflation in US, of course, it affects our dollar and our economy here. On account of that, we are dollarized. Although we have our shilling, but we're superimposed by the dollar. So if you look at the dollar and we're happy to say, oh, it was 180, now it is 130. I mean, it shouldn't even be that way. But we're happy to say our shilling is performing better against the dollar. And Tanzania says so, and Cameroon says so, and South Africa says so. And even now, if you are traveling abroad, you change your money into a dollar, not to some Chinese money. No, you change your money into dollar. Or you work, you work when you're out there. Actually, you take a calculator and say, this is $500. You multiply the 130, so that you know, in Kenyan context, how am I surviving with money? So yes, that's the economy. And therefore, you economically dominate. Now, when it comes to how then the packaging should be by the candidates, it's simply, how do we continue to dominate the world? And you also do it by taking the resources and giving back the least.
What do you think China is feeling as far as trade is concerned?
You see, China had a bigger war with Trump than it has with Biden. Biden more is probably the words used, but the active and the action of Donald Trump was probably to, press much as possible. He put a lot of restrictions on trade relationship between US and China. And, you know, even the policy of China and Taiwan and US and Taiwan, Trump superimposed himself in the foreign policy of Taiwan than Biden. Biden pulled back a bit. And therefore you can see now some fly zones of China over Taiwan and so on. Why Taiwan is important is because technologically it produces the chips that enhance technology in terms of the iDrive. Even the scramble for the space dominance is still Taiwan. So it's central, and therefore the scramble for it. So you realize that there's a presumption of aggressive policy by Trump in the world policy. Kamala Harris is not very convincing, although she looks nice. The Russian President Trump said she looks nice and she smiles well. Of course, that was cajoling. Probably very undermining in terms of how he put it, because of obviously he does not prefer at all.
Actually, Putin had placed a disclaimer, I think, just trying to meddle into the political communication by saying that he has endorsed Kamala Harris, and I think that was very, very, very intriguing. Few hours to the debate that they have, but quite interesting. Victor, I am quite disturbed and concerned on the outcome of the elections with regards to the ongoing war in the Middle East. That possibly could be more pressing. Of course, the Kenyan issue because of our relationship, but then the war that has consumed over 40,000 Palestinians and has created a humanitarian crisis, and something that the United Nations Security Council, through the International Criminal Court, had even issued warrant of arrest against Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu. I think he's on arrest warrant rather, himself and the leaders of Hamas. So I think it's quite interesting to see what goes on. But I like what the view from Wakili, that I think possibly we can have an end to this war, or we could have coercive diplomacy for a ceasefire when Trump assumes positions. I am not saying he is going to win, but I'm saying should the elections turn his way, then I think there could be turnaround on some of the issues that are affecting the region. However, I think NATO is very concerned because he's made a statement that he would not really be supportive of Ukraine. And that tells you the relationship that he probably has with Putin. We need to talk about what is going also in Sudan here, because I think we have been on set in the national television and international media, but then we do not call what is going on in Sudan, which is 1.5 flight from here, not far.
But I think that will be Raila's problem when he ascends into power.
Raila. So I think probably if he ascends to power, but I think there had been constant negotiation also, talking about what is the U.S. policy to Africa. The U.S. Secretary of State, Antony Blinken, even as he flew from Cairo and trying to solve the Sudan issue, from what I see, probably there is a semblance of peace conversation and discussion when Burhan and Dagalo similarly are speaking. But I'm just saying that it is also an issue because then there is a spillover effect. If it spills over, then we are going to have that effect in the region, the instability. So I think the whole world around diplomacy and relationship and regional stability in respect with the elections outcome in the US could also reflect then what is the relationship of President William Ruto with the one who will be elected, because then he has a good cordial relationship with Democrats. What really happens when Trump gets to power? So I think those are quite intriguing questions to look at.
That's quite intriguing because Trump never stepped a foot here in Africa. And that would really affect many African countries who majorly depend on the US and vice versa. I think we'll just have to leave it at that particular point and come back home a little bit and talk about what's affecting us kinyumbani. But it's interesting, talking about US and the policies and politics and how we relate is quite important. But then, gentlemen, We are here today. The last time we talked about many things happening in the country, we had a lot of predictions here and there. Wakili, we are here today.
Yeah, we did.
If you know, you know.
Yes, if you know, you know.
If you know, you know.
You know, the deputy president now,
Right.
office has changed hands. It's still the same office, but the person occupying has moved from Gachagua to Professor Kindiki. Let me put it this way. I do think that ultimately the president was looking for someone to work with. It was more of a relationship problem than the law. The law was used, obviously, to package the issue, but obviously it was a relationship issue. He couldn't work with the one that was in that office. Mm-hmm. So the packaging was his pronouncement and all, because that's what you do in law. You see, the problem with law, it pigeonholes issues. For instance, if you file for divorce, and I don't want you to file for one, but you file for divorce, there's cruelty, there's adultery, there's desertion, and if you don't go argue within those pigeonholes, you don't get a divorce. Yes, courts can refuse to give you a divorce, because you have to come within those pigeonholes. Yeah. And if you don't say, was there a divorce? No. Why do you want to divorce? He snores. I mean, you won't get the divorce, right? So you must pigeonhole reasons. So we had to look for reasons, or there ought to have been reasons, and there were reasons that were seen, pigeonhole within the Constitution. A deputy president shall be removed for the following reasons: this and this and this, and upon impeachment. Yeah. Impeachment shall happen when the following things have happened. You get? So that's the law. That's the packaging of the law. But obviously, if you look at it, it's a relationship issue between the two occupants, principal and the deputy principal of the office of the executive of the country, the presidency. So why then, if you speak into that, is Kindiki having a better relationship with the president than the former? I think when Deputy President Gachagua, former Deputy President Gachagua, took that office, he came because of an environment that was, right for him at the time.
Yes.
Which
was political.
Yes, which was political. It had nothing with the relationship or past relationship between the two. Professor Kindiki, and I will tell you, I can attest to this. When you come to my office, I'm the lawyer, and you say, I have this problem. Is it land? Is it a criminal issue? You unpackage yourself to me, all right? So you emotionally unpackage yourself. You say ABCD, so where do you come from? A certain place, you give me your ID, you give me your papers, you give me your background, you give me your education, you give me this. So I know the whole of you. That's why in law, the communication between an advocate and his client is protected. I am duty bound by oath not to even repeat what you say. So if you sold your kidney, I can't say to people, oh, that guy sold his kidney. No. I can even do the transaction for the kidney or whatever it is. But I can't unpackage that to someone else. So that relationship is very deep. So you should look at the president and the deputy president, a doctor and a professor, as a client-advocate relationship before you look at them in that office. If it is so, and they went to The Hague, and Professor Kindiki defended the president at The Hague, there's a lot of unpackaging of information that he did. And therefore, a relationship deeper than friendship, obviously, one that protects the other, emerged. If you're an advocate,
is that relevant in governance
yes,
of a country?
And I will tell you this. Why I'll tell you this. In the context it is, if the president was looking at a person who is calm and understands him, and he said when he was giving his speech, that there was nobody who was communicating the government policies because nobody in that government, especially the former cabinet, understood him. So nobody unpackaged information for him. For instance, the government, the Kenya Kwanza government, he says, could have done so many things, but nobody expresses them, so the people are not communicated enough with enough context.
There's the position of a government spokesperson.
Wait, I'm coming to that. What this government has had a problem with, and is still the problem, is communication to the public. The office of the government spokesperson took time to be filled. When it was filled, it was not filled with people who are gracefully marketing the president's, the government policies. And therefore, communication is a problem. Today, you must also have confidence in whoever is communicating to you as a government spokesperson. That office is dysfunctional, or in the alternative is no. Look, if you look at the government spokesperson and the president unpackages himself much better than even the office of the
I remember on Friday he said that.
So therefore, what he's done, he's gotten his lawyer there, so they have a relationship and friendship. 2, somebody who protects him because he's a lawyer with that background. Number 3, a person who probably intellectually they have harmony, because one is a doctor, one is a professor. It's supposed to be the other way in terms of academics. But one is a doctor, the deputy is a professor, and therefore, presumably, the professor will be able to understand his client more and unpackage that for him. So instead of the office of the, because Kindiki should have been put in the office of the government spokesperson, but now he assumed 2 roles. He has to speak for the government. Nobody's doing it right now. The government, the Kenyans don't listen to the spokesperson because he says nothing.
Wakili,
that's a clever way of dismissing the work of Dr. Isaac Mwaura. He is a doctor. To that extent, the assumption is that this is a person who has excelled.
Dr. Mwaura is doing a good job.
Is he? Well, I'll tell you this. Back home in Kilifi, we don't know who he is. I'll tell you the truth. We don't listen to him. We don't even know him. We don't know. We don't know whether he exists in Kilifi. And I can tell you in Kwale, in Tana River, in Taita, he is not known.
I will call Dr. Mwaura to come here.
Would that really cast aspersion on the office of the government spokesperson or an individual?
Do you know we all know who President Uhuru's spokesperson was?
Definitely.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
So I think as Wakili has said, from a legal relationship that was built, and I think to that extent, I would agree that in fact, in trying to fill a position, then probably, and you could see the evidence when Dr. William Ruto rose to speak, you could see that he underscored the importance of relationship that ought to have been there in the working. And especially when someone of his stature feels lonely in the position and in the presidency. I don't know that information was coded particularly to pass an information and, seal any doubts that was there in the process that took place on the removal of the former deputy president by impeachment. Probably that was affirming why that took place. But I think it also gave us an opportunity for us, and I keep on saying it was a process that's tested our legal being and probably our constitutionalism. It is a process that also made sure that we as Kenyans, for the first time, because we have been seeing the impeachment of governors, impeachment of who and who, but then at the stature of the deputy president, then it was unprecedented. Then it was a question of how does it happen? What is both legal implications and the political implications? And I think within it is in the place of the legal fraternity, and especially the legal minds like Wakili, to underscore the importance of what were the legal connotations around that and how that would have a spillover effect. But yes, politically speaking, I think there's going to be a spillover effect. And I said it here, and I am very confident that one, you had seen the shift, the political tectonic shift in central Kenya. Probably others are underscoring the importance, saying that it might not really stay, because now in central Kenya, where there is east and west, and east are appreciating for the first time that such a position has landed in Mount Kenya East, probably they would try to frown when Mount Kenya West is in the complaining mood. Possibly. That was probably a political game that we are yet to see how it plays. But then, it is important lesson that whoever is ascending into power must negotiate power with an instrument, and that is a political party. Failure to do that, and then that will be a problem to you. You don't negotiate power based on trust.
Which
that we are seeing, we are negotiating because I trust you.
Former deputy president did have a political party.
Who?
Gachagua.
He had UDA.
No, I'm just saying, party in Mount Kenya, that's not saying that this one was no party.
Okay.
I mean, William Ruto got with URP. There was a negotiation. Even as it was being disbanded, but he was in URP. Other leaders had got their political parties. And you could actually see that probably a lesson that all other political, and now you understand that there is some rumors that Mount Kenya is actually forming their own political party.
Okay.
To make sure that there's negotiation. So
That's going to form a different direction.
I think for me, that is it. But we have a new deputy president. Who is going to be the deputy party leader of UDA?
I have to ask you this question,
Yes.
gentlemen, because now we have got two PhD holders in office. Very important for us as a country.
One in law and one in science, right?
Yes.
So, science of botany.
Botany.
Yes.
So what I'm going to ask is this. In terms of measuring how this government is going to work, 2 months to gauge the relationship and governance. Because when you have, these two gentlemen have a very long-standing relationship. Let's start from before 2007, we all know what happened. Do you think 2-3 months is enough to gauge whether the relationship is more of a governance or personal relationship? Wakili, I think I have only 2 minutes to do this.
Well, I think that's still little time because of the activities of Professor. I know Professor.
Yeah.
I doubt he's going to be very proactive in terms of expressing his own that has already been expressed by the mind and action of the president. He will be more inclined to, and because he's a lawyer and understands that, I would also probably behave in a certain context of the principle of governance, being that you need something called collective responsibility in the office of the president. There was no collective responsibility. Once he's accepted that principle in law of collective responsibility, you seem to mirror what the president continually does. So if the president says this, you go behind him. If you queue behind him, you keep on yesing him, all right? Because that's what collective responsibility is. In the event that you differ in opinion, you do it in the back room, back office, not at the front office. When you come to the front office, you meet the public. You meet opinion of the public. And therefore, your opinion that is made loudly and with the highest decibels, you become vocal with your opinions. It means, therefore, you may cause a friction with what the pronouncement of the president will be and be seen to act contrary to the president. And that perception is what will create the friction. Because remember, the president is not himself per se. Yeah. He has handlers. And therefore, you say something, somebody answers it in charge.
Do you think he's happy now?
The president?
Yes.
Oh, he's very happy. I can tell you he's very happy. I have handled divorces. When after a divorce and a new, another person comes into the house, even the diet changes. I can tell you how they eat. I've seen it many times. Of course, after some time, it becomes old.
The
question is,
you've got into people's houses after divorce.
With that precedent, how many divorces can you have?
To have a change of diet.
To have a change of diet every day.
Is the president happy?
I think it's a moment of deja vu. It's a moment of relief.
Yeah.
One of the things that you can also always point at is the probability of a clash in opinions. Sometimes, especially people and personality with that qualification. But I think that has been explained that with their relationship before and up to now there is a different kind of relationship. But then it is personal, could be cordial, but now it is work. That sometimes requires, a difference in opinion and how people view things and on delivery. So I think 2 months or 3 months is quite a short time, that I would agree. But I think moving forward, there is a number of dynamics that still comes to play. Remember what I tell you, that there could be interest that pulls back on the voter region of Mount Kenya, who would possibly want to have a conversation of Professor Kindiki to be the spokesperson of the region. That could come to play because that is the closest person to power right now. So there's a lot of play.
Let me just add on to what he said this way. 1 minute.
Yes.
It depends on what the president wants. Is the president an impatient man? Would you say he's impatient? Because if there are things that he wants Professor Kindiki to prosecute, and he prosecutes, then probably that's okay. But I think the president is impatient. Has been impatient with his cabinet. He's even told them off. I told them, look, I know more than what you know in your ministries. He's always blamed them for failure. He has also blamed the government, the entirety, for not communicating what the hard work that he does, or he perceives to be hard work himself. And therefore, he seems to be impatient with deliverables, whatever deliverables they are. So if there is terms of reference that have been given to Kindiki, and he doesn't deliver them, I can assure you that he can shop for another person. The divorce can continue.
I want us to stop this and have a change of diet, as you said, by stopping at that particular point.
Would we wish our candidates?
Oh yeah, yes, happening. We all pass through that system.
So I think it's important to wish
over 960,000 candidates.
Yeah, 60,000 who are doing their KCSE, right?
Yes.
So the best of luck, and we hope that the ministry. There have been a lot of engagement, whether there would be exam would be leaked or not. I think every player in the education sector, quite important to give support to the candidates as they sit their exams.
Exactly. Wakili, during your days in the bush somewhere, the school I don't want to mention.
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, it's a bit different now. The environment is much better than it was then. But again, you are, like we say, God doesn't give you a test that is so big for you to prosecute. So yes, to the candidates in the country, all the best. All the best. I think take your stride in it. It's a new chapter being opened. And we wish you well.
All right.
And thank God for you being the candidates for us.
As I said, let's change the diet and take a break. When we come back, we'll be now eating something different. We are divorcing GMK at this particular point. We'll meet again tomorrow. But when we come back, we're crossing over to Radio Taifa for that. I love what you said, Wakili, that when people divorce, a lot happens, change of diet and all that. Things start to grow. Thank you so much for watching. I'm Victor Lo. Good morning.